Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are in the kitchen making hand pies. If you like to make pies during the holidays, these hand pies are wonderful to take to different family events. We are also going to be sharing a vintage recipe for a pie crust mix that you'll want to have on hand. So if you're interested in making pies, hand pies, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. Well, it's getting to be that season. It is getting to be the holiday seasons where we have Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we're in the kitchen making delicious baked goods and delicious meals. Well, today what we're going to do is we are going to be using some of our delicious pie fillings that we have been canning. Now I have 4 kinds here, and we've canned 3 together. We canned the peach pie filling, we canned the apple pie filling, and we've canned the cherry pie filling. I did not show you a recipe for doing the raspberry filling yet. If you remember, during raspberry season, I was freezing all of my raspberries because this is something that I could make in the wintertime when I had a little more time. Right now, we have several jars still on our shelf because I made a whole lot last year. We had a really good crop last year. And so at this point, I don't need to make any more, but I may take those out of the freezer and turn them into pie filling if we need the freezer space, because we do love our pie filling, and that raspberry pie filling is delicious. So I'm going to be choosing a couple of these to use today. So I'm going to set those aside right now. And so I've been thinking I need to make a pie crust mix because I make a lot of pies during the holidays. I don't like to make my pie dough and then freeze it because I'm not a person who plans ahead. I would forget to take the pie crust out of the freezer, and it would just be easier for me just to mix it up again instead of waiting for it to thaw. So I'm not the kind of person that plans well enough to have it frozen. But if I can avoid the one step that takes probably the most time in making pie crust, and that's the cutting the shortening into the flour, then I would save myself a lot of time. So what we're making today is a dry mix, a pie crust dry mix. And we are going to be adding the dry ingredients and the lard or shortening, whichever you're using, into this to make the dry mix. And we're going to have it all ready. So whenever you want to make a pie crust, all you do is add a little cold water and then roll it out. So that I figure I can do. I know I did a pie crust video when I first started my channel. And so if you want to know how to make a pie crust and all of that for a full pie, you can go back and look at that. I was going to just take that recipe and times it by whatever I needed on the shelf for the holidays. And then I started looking, and I found a vintage Crisco pie crust mix. And I thought, well, let me look at it and compare it to mine. And they were just about the same. The Crisco one has just a little more shortening, which is fine with me. And it already showed how many cups to use per pie and things like that. So that was helpful. So I thought I will do that one. So we're going to do a vintage Crisco pie crust mix for you can either store it in the refrigerator or you can store it in the freezer, or it is shelf stable, but I would put it in the cold where it will stay fresh longer. I think it will stay fresh in the refrigerator. It sounded like 3 months, the freezer 6 months, and then on the shelf, you'll just have to kind of watch it. I don't know if they gave a time for that. Um, I do like mine cold because if it's cold when you add the water, it will be flakier. So I wouldn't store mine on the shelf. I would always keep it where it's cold. And I think I'm going to do the freezer. Um, and if we need the freezer space, I'll just move it to the refrigerator. So what I'm going to do today is mix that up and put it in a plastic container, and that will be ready for my freezer. Now, whenever I make a pie crust, I usually use a pastry cutter, and I've done that for every time I've ever made a pie. I've never used a food processor. I know you can use your stand mixer too. I've never used that, and I've never used a food processor. But because we're going to be making so much of it, I thought, well, I'm going to give this a try. And I've got this large food processor that will hold 6 cups of flour. And most food processors, I think, will. But if yours doesn't, you can use your KitchenAid stand mixer. You can use the pastry cutter. You can use your hands, however you like to cut the shortening into the flour. But I'm going to try this with my food processor and see how it goes. Now, this recipe will make 5 pie crusts, and that's just a single pie crust. I'm going to make the single recipe, but then I'm going to later make another one and add them together because I'm going to need more for the holidays. And while I have all of my stuff out, I'm just going to do it all together. But I'm going to do one recipe with you. If I doubled it, it's 12 cups of flour, and it would fill my food processor to just about the top, and I wasn't sure if it would cut in very well, the shortening. So I'm going to do 6 cups, and just like this recipe, and make one batch, and then off screen I will make another and add it to my mix because I will need more than just the 5 pie crusts. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to put in my food processor, and as far as the blades, I researched this. And so again, disclaimer, I've not done this before, so this is new to me too. But it said that the metal blade, even though your mixer or your food processor may have a pastry cutter blade that's plastic, they said they all agreed that the metal blade worked better. So we're going to use the metal blade. So I've got my metal blade in there. I'm going to put 6 cups of all-purpose flour in, and I've got mine measured out here. And you can see that's a lot of flour. Now, if your food processor can hold this much, just half the recipe and do it in 2 batches. Then we are going to put in 1 tablespoon of salt. And you can use any kind of salt you want. I'm going to go ahead and use just canning salt because it's a fine salt. I usually use kosher salt, but it's a thick granulated salt, and I just want it to be mixed in well with the flour and the shortening or lard. So I'm just using this finer salt, which is my canning salt. Table salt's fine. Then we need 2 and 1/3 cups of shortening. And of course, since this was a Crisco recipe, you would be using Crisco. Now I'm using lard, and I render lard. I get lard from the butcher shop, and I render it down in my crock pots about once a year, make enough for the season, and then I put it in these large peanut butter jars and put it in the freezer, and I keep that on hand all the time. I did this last winter, and so I am probably going to do another batch of this. We still have a couple more jars out there, probably after the holidays, because I use up a lot of it during the holidays with all my baking. So if you're interested in how to render your own lard, you'll be seeing a recipe on that in the future. But I'm going to use 2 and 1/3 cups of my own lard. Now, if you're using shortening, you can use shortening. Same thing, Crisco, same thing. I would not use butter for this recipe. It is specific for shortening. Unless you want to be bold and try it, that's fine. But it's recommended for a shortening or lard. So let me get my lard. I actually had set my jar of lard on the counter last night so I can get it out easy. And so it's soft like shortening out of the pantry, but I wanted to get it colder. And so I just stuck it in the fridge after I measured it so that I can have it just a little more hard because it will cut in nicely and leave some little pea-sized pieces. I don't know if it's been in the refrigerator long enough yet, but we'll try it out anyway. So let me grab that. So it did firm up some. It feels fairly hard. I'm sure in the center it's still pretty soft, but I think it'll do better, a little more firm. So that's just a hint. If you're using shortening or lard, you may want to go ahead and just stick it in the refrigerator to get it, or your freezer, just to get it a little bit firm before you cut it in. You don't have to. It doesn't say that on the recipe. That is just what I like to do. So we're putting that in. And this is going to max out my mixer already. So I'm glad that I didn't opt to try 2 batches in here. That would have been a lot. Get it all in there. And let's get the lid on. And we're just going to pulse it. Whoops, and I've got it on run already. Let me turn that off. Okay, so we're just going to pulse. And basically, we just want to incorporate that shortening so that it kind of looks like a cornmeal texture. Let's see what it looks like. I think we got it. Looks like it's all incorporated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a plastic container, and you can use whatever kind of container you're happy with in your refrigerator or freezer, but I prefer this plastic one. And you can use like gallon ice cream plastic pails, things like that. That would be fine. So let's pour that in here without making a mess. There we go. Perfect. Whoops, now I make a mess. All right, and I'm going to show you the texture of this. If I squeeze it with my hand, it's going to stick together. But I don't want to do that. I want to leave it powdery. So here's the texture. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make another batch off camera. And then I'm going to bring you back because we're going to start making our hand pies. All right, I got my mix all mixed up and it fits perfectly into a 1 gallon container. So if you have an ice cream container, a 1 gallon ice cream container, it will fit perfectly in there if you double it. This is a doubled batch, and this would make 10 pie crusts. So 5 double crust pies or 10 single crust pies. So now we're going to make the pie crust. So I've got myself a bowl, and all you need to do once you have your mix is to mix your ingredients with water. So I'm going to go ahead and do a double pie crust to get started. If I need to make more, I'll make more. I want to make quite a few hand pies because these freeze really well. We are also going down to our families this weekend, and I want to take some for all the families. And So I'm going to be making quite a few, but we'll just get started with 2 batches of pie crust, and then I can just mix up more as I go. It'll probably keep the pie crust from getting tough as well. So for 2 pie crusts for a double pie, it says, and I will have the ingredients and the directions on this mix and these hand pies at the end of the video, or you can go to my Blue Rooster Farm Facebook page in a couple of days, and I will have it on there that you can just copy and get those recipes right there. So what we need is, for a double pie, is 2 1/4 cups of mix. And again, this mix is so nice and soft, and I can tell we're not going to have to add too much butter or too much water, because adding too much water will toughen your crust. It's the shortening and the flour that give it the flakiness. So let's see here. So I don't want to pack it. I'm just doing it loose. There's 2. And then, again, I'm just kind of loosening it up here when I'm getting it. And 1/4. Now, you don't have to be exact, because when you're adding your water, you are going to add just the amount it takes, no more. And so if it's a more humid day, you would probably be adding less. If it's a rainy or a sunny, dry day, you're probably going to be adding more. So the directions say to add 4 tablespoons of ice cold water. And I'm going to get a fork, because it's best to mix it with a fork. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, since it says 4 tablespoons, I'm going to go half of that to start with. I've got a cup of water here with ice cubes. I'm not going to use the ice cubes. I'm just using the water, but I want it nice and cold. So I'm just going to drip around. There's 1 tablespoon. And I'm just trying to get it dispersed all over the top, not in one single spot. Okay. And then I'm just going to take my fork, and I'm just kind of pushing it together a little bit, kind of flaking it around. I'm not stirring it like this. I'm just lifting it kind of like this and just seeing how we're doing. Now there's probably some spots that it's ready to go together. I feel it really almost there. I'm going to add 1 more tablespoon, just because I do want it to have a little bit of water. I don't want it to be, if you don't add any water, it's just going to be kind of a sandy crust. The water helps it. Okay, so I added 3. Now I'm going to see what it looks like. It's going together nicely. I'm just kind of pushing it together. Add 1 teaspoon. That was a half, so here's 1. Okay. I think it's ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little flour on my board, and you can do this on your counter. My husband and Landon, my son, made this for me a couple years ago, I guess several years ago now, and I just love it. It's great for biscuits, cinnamon rolls, bread, pie crusts, anything that I need a work surface for. So I'm going to just let it go right there, and it's not, I haven't packed it together yet. Make sure you can see it. And then I'm going to bring it together. One thing about pie crust is you don't want to overwork them, because that will make it a tough pie crust. So I'm just getting the outside, a little flour on it, pushing it together. And if you wanted to at this point, you could put it in the refrigerator and let it set. But since I want to get these made, I'm not going to. And that's kind of also why I used a little less water. So let's see if we can get this rolled out. And I always make sure I have plenty of flour on my rolling pin and on my surface. And I roll from the center out. Now, if you don't want to make your own pie crust, you can certainly use pre-made pie crust. It's just going to be a round shape, and so you will just have to buy a couple of maybe packages depending on how many you want to make. And if you don't have your own filling, which most people don't, you can just use canned filling from the store. That is perfectly fine. And I am just making sure my surface continues to be fine underneath. I don't want them sticking. It is better to have a drier crust than an overly wet crust because the texture will be better with a drier crust. This one seems to be perfect. It's rolling out nicely. I don't see any problem with this at all. And I like to get it, gosh, I don't know how thin this would be. You want it pretty thin. You want it to be able to hold the fruit, but you don't want it so thin that, it's going to break. I don't know how thin that would be. But this was a double mix here, and I'm getting it to about a 14-inch circle. Actually, probably bigger than that, maybe a 16-inch circle. Okay, and I think it's perfect. Okay, next thing I want to do, and I'm just going to go ahead and dust it a little, is normally, or in the past when I make these, I have taken a circle shape and cut out a circle, or found something in my kitchen, like a bowl, a lid, something that I could get a nice size for a hand pie. And so I would take that and either take a butter knife or a paring knife and just trace around it so I'd have a circular piece. Sometimes I'm able to find, like if I wanted to do it smaller, so if I wanted to do a fairly small pie, this is a lid off of my canister, and it's actually got a sharp edge. So I could do a small pie just by using this. And then this right here, it's just a dome. It's a miniature dome. I could use this for a larger hand pie. And these would be what I normally use. And I'm going to do one with one of these two. But then I found this at a secondhand store. It's the Pampered Chef cut and seal. And I have the little ravioli one already. But I thought, I wonder if this will make very good hand pies. So I thought, well, I'll buy it. It just was a couple dollars and give it a try. So we're going to try this. But first, I'm going to show you how I usually do it. And I'm trying to decide what size pies I want to make. We can make one of each. Make one of these little ones and one of these big ones and then decide. So what I do is I would just push it on there, and I have a nice little circle. And when I fold it over, that's how big the pie will be. That's not too bad. If I use this, whoops, fold it over, it will be like that. And that's pretty good. That's usually about the size that I make. And I would say that's probably 6 inches, a 6-inch circle. So depending on the size will be whatever shape that you find or whatever thing you find around the house. Now, this right here, what we're going to do, and I notice my inside is just a little bit thicker, not much. Let me just thin that out a little bit. So with this, and I always try to get as much out of the first roll as I can, so I really am going close to each other. You're going to use it to cut your first piece, and that one is a little smaller than this one, but because you're going to have another piece on top, it will probably be more equivalent once you have your filling to this one. So let me get one more piece here. Let's do this right here. And you just push on the outside, not the middle, just the outside. There we go. So I have 2 of these. So you'll need 2 of these to make a pie, or 1 of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my sheet here, and I've already got parchment paper on it, and I love to use the insulated pans. If you don't have the insulated pans, ask for them for Christmas, because they are so nice and you don't have to worry about burning, and I really like them for all kinds of baking. I also have the insulated sheet cake pan too, for like bar cookies and stuff like that. So let me make a little room here. There we go. And I'm going to put each one in a spot, and we're going to try each one. And let me go ahead and get this out of the way for just right now. So I want to make sure you can see this well. Okay. So I decided we're going to do raspberry and apple to start off with. And if I need to make more, I don't know how many this will make. If I need to make, I know I'm going to need to make more pie crust. If I need to make more, or if I've got plenty of pie crust, or if I know I need more pies, I'll get another jar of filling. So if you're making a circle one, and these 2 are the ones that we're going to flip over like this, what you're going to do, I'll do 1 raspberry and 1 apple. You're going to take your filling, and I always like to give it a little bit of a stir, and you're going to put, depending on how big your circle is, this one of course is going to have more than this one. Okay. This is 1 egg, a tablespoon of water, and just mix together. And I'm just going to go around my edges like so. And you can use your finger too. In fact, that's what I normally use, but I'm trying to be professional here. And we're just going to go around the edge like that. Then we're going to very carefully take, and I'm going to use this fork here just to kind of spread it out a little bit, and place our pie crust on top there. And we can use a fork, and I think you can see what I'm doing. And we're just going to seal it. Now, if you get a little hole, that's okay, because we are actually going to have some holes in this in order to let steam come out. And I think I'm going to take just a little of this filling out. I think I might have too much. Let me see. Without making a mess, let's take a little bit out. And let me wash my hands. Okay, so let's flip this top over, and we're doing the same thing. Pressing with the fork to make crimped edges. crimping the edges with the fork with that egg wash does a really good job of making sure our seams don't leak on our pockets. Now, if you like more crust and less filling, the smaller size would probably be your choice. But if you like more filling, the larger pie would hold more filling. So we're going to go ahead and get those two set aside, and let's do this one. So again, we've got 2 circles cut. Now we're going to do the same thing with our egg wash. Just get all around the perimeter. And then we'll put a spoonful of the pie filling, and we'll use some more apple. Since we don't have to fold over this circular pocket, we can fill it pretty good with the pie filling. So I think that's good. Now we'll take this top piece of dough, lay it directly on top, and then we're going to take our cutter, and this time we're going to use the button in the middle, and that's going to be the crimper, and it will crimp and seal the seams. And so there's what we've got right there. I would say that our round pie or hand pie is probably equivalent to the larger folded over hand pie. About the same amount of filling, I'd say. So I'm going to get a sharp paring knife, and we're going to make the vent holes so that the steam can escape out of the hand pies while they're baking. And I'll just make 3 sharp little slits in the half moon sized ones, and then a flower shape with 4 slits in the round one. And before we stick it in the oven, we are going to add a coating of our egg wash, and this will give it a nice brown color and give it a little bit of a shine. So once we have these in, we need to put these in a 375-degree preheated oven, and I'd say we're going to be baking them for about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the size of your pies and your oven. You want the inside to get bubbly, so you'll probably see some of it bubbling out of a vent hole or a little bit coming out of the side. That means that they are hot in the center and they are done. So after I did that egg wash, I've got to go back and reopen those slits. It kind of closed them up. There we go. Now I'm putting these in the oven, and we'll make some more. I'm going to go ahead and make round hand pies for right now, and then I may switch over and do some of the folded over ones as well. Right now I'm just going to cut my circles and get as many as I can out of this rolled portion of the dough, and just make sure they're all pretty much the same thickness and not too thin but not too thick either. So again, be very frugal, get really close to the edges. That way you'll have less dough that you have to re-roll, because the more you re-roll it, the tougher your dough will become. I know this is going to be a really tender pastry, but it can get tough when you overwork it. And so I've made a little bit of extra space right there so I can get one more out of it. There we go. So then I'm going to put that over with the others, and we're going to take all of these scraps and I'm going to put them in a pile, and then I'm going to squeeze them together, not kneading them or anything like that, but just squeezing them together to get them to stick together. Being very careful not to overwork it. And then once it's in a nice ball again, I will reflour my surface, and I will roll this little piece out now. And you'll see that it'll be a little bit more dry because we've had more flour incorporated in it. But it still should roll out nicely, and you should still be able to cut out your shapes just fine with it. Now what I like to do with pieces, I'll just do this one last roll, I think, here. And then what I like to do with the extras after that is just keep them in a little pile or place them in a pan and then put them in the oven after I have them all with some cinnamon and sugar on top. And they are neat little tidbits of pie crust with the cinnamon and sugar taste that are really delicious. And we like to snack on them. And it's also a good sample as to what your crust is going to taste like. So we will see how many we can get out of this one. I think we can get probably 2, 3. I think I can fit on this one. And you can also piece them together like I'm doing here. And that's fine, especially if it's the bottom one. I'm just a little shy there. If I roll it out, I might be able to get it to fit. Also, just putting another piece of dough over there and sticking it together, that should do it. And then I think I can get that last circle right there. Add one more piece. And that will work just fine. And with these scraps, I will just make our little cinnamon sugar snacks with them. They'll be too tough to roll out the third time. So let me go ahead and get all of this stuff organized, and I'll bring you right back. And let's just speed this up so we can just zoom right through it. With our double crust, we are able to make, it looks like 7 of the round hand pies, and then the large folded over hand pie and the small folded over hand pie. This makes a nice amount, but because we are going to be sharing these and we want some in the freezer, I am going to be making up a couple of more batches of the pie dough and rolling it out. In fact, I'm going to be going through 3 jars of pie filling. So let's just watch as I make these. Okay, I have got them all made, and I went through quite a bit of my pie crust. In fact, I went ahead and made another batch to add back to it. So, and I also opened up one of my peach pie fillings. So I've now got peach, raspberry, and apple. So I made most of them round, but I did go ahead and make a few of the hand pies too, and I've got a few more over here that you can't see. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the glaze to them, and I'm going to bring you down here so that you can see what I'm doing. So be right back. Don't these look delicious? So what I've got here is a bowl that I have mixed some powdered sugar, some milk, some extract. You can use vanilla extract, almond extract, or a mixture. Now, normally I like to put the glaze on when they're still warm, but because I was making so many and was rolling them out throughout, I didn't get a chance to glaze them while they were right out of the oven. So what I'm doing is just they're warm or pretty cool. I am just going over them and drizzling them. Another thing you can do is just put them face down into the icing and then turn them back upright and let the icing drizzle off. But I find that that works better when they're warm still. Or you can just icing them like you would a cake and just smooth it all over the top. So I am going to do mostly the drizzle. A few of them I will icing like I'm doing here, but the drizzle works just pretty much the easiest. So let me get those done and I will bring you back and show you what they look like when they're all finished. All right, so there is our hand pie. Now that's the round one. And there is our big circle that we folded in half. So they look really good. Now we have to try it. So I've got that one on the plate. I'm gonna cut it in half. Okay, and take a look at the inside. Look how flaky the crust is. Doesn't that look good? This one is an apple. It's good crust. Really, really flaky. The pie filling is super juicy, moist. The icing on top gives it just that sweetness that you need. So, if you want a good recipe for a hand pie, give this one a try. I think you're gonna like it. I hope you get a chance to try these hand pies. They are really delicious. If you enjoy watching my videos, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that. Also, don't forget to share and like, and if you have a comment, leave it in the box below. Thanks for watching.